Today's show is brought to you in Nerdovision. That's right, we went with the glasses this morning because I got to try to look smart around our next guest, because when she comes in, she's going to be dropping all kinds of knowledge. You've heard all about this deep sea mining stuff in our community lately, and we want to make sure that you get to hear more about it and hear what's coming on. There's some events that are happening today. There's something that's happening tomorrow. There's stuff going all around. Now, you just got caught up with all the latest news from the Associated Press. We have a whole lot of other stuff on tap to talk about, all these sports. I've got the sports updates. I got to talk about all these other things. But we have such a great guest in studio with us today, and I want to make sure that we can get her as much time as possible from Northern Marianas College. Kelsey, I'm so glad to have you in here. The guests are going to be a lot happier once they hear you start talking about everything that's happening with this deep sea mining. So welcome to the show. Welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'd like to clarify that I'm not a deep sea mining expert. I am But
you could be. If you set your mind to it, you can do anything.
We can all do anything if we set our mind to it. So I'm a shallow reef coral ecologist by training, and now I'm over at the Marianas College as the Natural Resource Management Program Coordinator.
And just to be clear, she's not shallow. It's for shallow reefs, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But, you know, hey, vanity does persist. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the deep sea mining RFI that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management put out, and then the subsequent community events that are going to be going on both today, tomorrow, and throughout the remainder of the comment period. So as you know, I saw that you had Sheila Babauta on about 4 days ago to also talk about deep sea mining. So this isn't a new to you topic, but as you know, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management put out a request for information. And this request for information has a 30-day period. What you'll notice when you look at the BOEM RFI, they show you a map. And this map has a area in it, and I think Brad's pulling it up for us.
Do you want me to do the register or your graphics here?
The graphics,
yeah.
Here
we go.
Perfect, thank you. So this RFI has a map. So in this map, you'll see the black dotted lines. That is the U.S. exclusive economic zone. The CNMI has an exclusive economic zone of about 3 nautical miles off the archipelago. So after that 3 nautical miles, our jurisdictional territory ends, and then we have the federal exclusive economic zone. You'll notice in the red we have the Mariana Trench Marine National Monument, and then that blue polygon right over there off to the right is the area that is requested for more information for potential deep sea mining leases. And when we talk about deep sea mining, we're talking about the mining of polymetallic nodules, you've probably heard the word nodule a lot, and ferromanganese crust, or these really cobalt-rich crusts. And so what we know, which is very little comparatively in the world of science, what we know about the cobalt-rich crusts and the nodules is that they do exist on older seafloors and sea mounts. We can only understand that the request for information came from a series of executive orders earlier in January that was called like Unleashing America's Critical Minerals. There's about 3 or 4 executive orders that came out to make the Bureau of Energy Management try to go out and solicit and find additional rare minerals. We're not the only country doing this. We're also looking at Japan, Singapore, India. They're all also trying to mine their own rare minerals. So these cobalt crusts and these nodules contain the rare minerals. And what we're looking at in this RFI is a request for information, a request for public comment. We also have scientists from the continental United States putting together comments. But relatively little is known about this area where BOEM is requesting information. So if we go further down in the document.
I'm going to make it a little bit fancier. What I'm going to do, I'm just turning it into a PDF so I can navigate it a little bit easier. There we go.
Absolutely.
And that's easy for me to say too.
Perfect.
All right,
so if we go further down in the document, we'll talk about mining. Here are the mineral deposit types. So we've got the polymetallic nodules. I love that the author describes them as potato-shaped. We have the polymetallic, so sulfides or seafloor massive sulfide. Now, these are sulfur chimneys, essentially, and they occur in areas where there's venting or volcanic activity. To our knowledge, these are not in the area of the RFI. But again, that's to our knowledge. Very little is known. The third mineral of interest is the ferromanganese crust. So that one's down below. And that generally occurs on the top of seamounts.
Is that what they use for Ferrero Rocher?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
that's it?
It's what makes it crunchy.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, so all of these are important minerals to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. But then there's also a fourth type of mineral deposit, and that is in the mud. And it is not listed on this particular sheet, but we can look to what Japan is doing. They are doing a lot of deep sea mud mining and then extracting the minerals from that mud. We can only expect that because Japan and the US is also involved in this, they're looking at the mud and the rare mineral extraction. We can only expect that this request for information and potential mining companies would be interested in mud mining as well.
Wow, I mean, it seems amazing that that this is even a thing, because it came up, it seems like it came up pretty quick, but we've been pretty good about getting the word out about it and getting interest in about it.
Well, Brad, you're right. It did come up very quickly. So unlike other BOEM initiatives, there was very little community engagement. The governor's offices weren't even notified or made aware. The congresswoman wasn't notified or made aware until 48 hours prior to the release of the request for information. So that's why we're coming together as a community. All of the work that Friends of the Marianas Trench is doing, Tano Tasis and Todo, they are actually putting together a series of webinars with deep sea science experts, actual experts. And then the college is putting together the community conversation tomorrow, Wednesday, at American Memorial Park, 4:30 to 7. Please show up. So we have community efforts trying to pull together, but very little was done ahead of time on the federal government's end to make us aware of these issues or of this request for information.
And so how did we find out about it? Do people that we know and love just kind of hang out looking at the Federal Register? I wonder what's coming up today.
Yeah, you know, I think that it's a few things. So people we know and love do check out the Federal Register. We also have wonderful advocates like folks from Friends of the Marianas Trench and also from the Congressional Office and from the Governor's Office. They keep an eye out on these press releases. So BOEM did put out a press release about 48 hours before the RFI was issued. So we do have folks in the community that are looking out for us, and then it really, you know, it's like that WhatsApp chain of forwarded messages. Once the word was out that the RFI was posted, then folks started to look at it. When I looked at it this morning, we had about 104 comments. And so the intention is to inform the community about the potential impacts and implications of deep sea mining. I'll let them know, you know, how very little is known about this area. And then also encourage folks to comment on the RFI. And you know, I think a lot of times when we have folks coming in telling us to do one thing or another, the economic context of our islands is not really considered. And so I think it would be really remiss if we didn't note that we are in a very tough economic time right now in terms of tourism is declining. And so folks are looking at this RFI and they're like, hey, maybe there is an economic benefit to this. But I just want to go back to that map and show that the RFI, the request for information, demonstrates a polygon that is outside of our jurisdictional waters. And so if it's outside of our jurisdictional waters, NMI, the Northern Marianas Islands, has very little ability to be able to monitor and regulate the activity of these mining companies. As we saw in American Samoa, which just went through this RFI process, it was the goodwill of the leasee to provide a cost sharing or a revenue sharing opportunity. And the company, the leasee, the proposed leasee, decided that 1% of the revenue was enough. And so when we look at the potential cost sharing benefits to the potential environmental damages, it's really unclear that it would be worth it. The other component is folks are like, well, maybe we could, have the mineral mining or refining happen here in the Marianas.
Oh, that would smell great.
That would smell so great. Can you imagine, deep sea mud up on our island? So the other component of that is we just simply don't have the technology or the infrastructure. I know that there is going to be a mineral refinery. I think it's somewhere in the Midwest. It's currently under production, but also countries like Japan, India, have these refineries, and it is really hard to imagine that the mining companies would not just send the minerals and the muds and the polymetallic nodules to areas that they could then be refined at, not here in the Marianas. The other component is we don't have the port capacity right now to provide berthing for the support vessels. So it is highly unlikely through either the refinery process, through ports, or through regulation that we would be able to see any of the revenue generated from whatever is unearthed. And the other component are the ecological considerations. So if you scroll a little bit further down on that document.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Rolling. Oh, they look delicious.
So, yeah, right? These are the potato-shaped polymetallic nodules. And so you can see the little red box. That is the Voigt seamount. And we did observe on a Ocean Exploration Trust Nautilus cruise, we did see polymetallic nodules. And so part of that area is within the RFI. If you scroll down a little bit further, we've got the ferromanganese crust and the polymetallic nodules. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, there we go. This is the image I was looking for. So the mining process, this is occurring throughout the water column. So depending on what the miner's intention is, whether it is the nodules on the abyssal plains, which is the very bottom of the seafloor, so that's occurring at around 3,000 meters.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is right. Then we have the ferromanganese crust, which occurs on the top of the seamount. And so what that would look like is actually scraping the crust off of the seamount. And so all of these remote vessels then have an umbilical cord to the support vessel. So there's 2 points of impact. And this is, again, from my understanding and what has been communicated to me from the experts. So we have the actual plume from the collector occurring. We have the removal of the hard substrate. But then what else happens is once the minerals go up onto the support vessels, we then have what's called dewatering. So they're removing the water from the minerals, from the sediment, and they're putting that plume back into the mid-water column. And that mid-water column is what we as fishermen and people who love to eat fish care about. So these seamounts are the basis of the food system for a lot of our migrating pelagic species. It's anticipated that these sediment plumes will have pretty significant impacts on the pelagic species. And we'll hear more about that today from Dr. Jeff Drazen out of the University of Hawaii. He's going to do a webinar at 2 p.m. today, Tomorrow Standard Time. So I think I sent you that link too.
You did?
Yeah. And so we have, these impacts on both the individual organisms, but also at an ecosystem level. The other component of this is the larvae of these organisms actually migrate vertically through the water column, and they provide food for all of the different fish that we love to eat. So not only are we looking at the removal of their actual habitat, we are looking at the potential impacts of the larvae on the pelagic and benthopelagic species.
Wow, I mean, there's so much to think about this. Now, I remember back in the days, like, I was here when everyone was wearing orange shirts that had the Friends of the Marianas Trench on it. My friend Angelo was a big part of that, and Ike Cabrera and everybody. And I remember it being a real big deal because of the conservation, but that was more fish. And a lot of the folks who were against it were people who wanted to do commercial fishing. And people who are interested in the potential for mining one day, saying that we would lose the ability to capitalize. And I remember hearing it like, those are our minerals, we should be capitalized. And I heard that over and over and over again. So, but this does not look like those two ideas match. I can't imagine the mining folks would be great pals with commercial fishermen anyway. Not that they fish in this area, but you know, the dewatering plume doesn't go all the way back down to where it was. I mean, so you basically, fish breathe in the water are going to be having all these particulates in the water, and I can't imagine it's just like a little speck here and there.
Yeah, it's not a little speck here and there, and you're so right. And so, as we know, the surface currents generally move east to west. And we also know that the closest area of the potential lease block is only 128 miles from the Northern Marianas, from Saipan specifically.
That's in the blue one that you were talking about?
That's in the blue
I'm going
one.
to scroll up real fast.
Yeah.
Woo, watch
Whee!
that. Okay. So this is only 120. Now, you said this area is outside of
Saipan jurisdictional waters. So every territory and state has a 3 nautical mile boundary. That is our jurisdiction. This is outside our jurisdiction, our CNMI exclusive economic zone. This is into the federal exclusive economic zone. And so we have much brighter and bigger legal minds looking at what's called OXLA, the Outer Continental Shelf Leasing Agreement. And that discusses the different minerals or critical resources like oil and natural gas on the Outer Continental Shelf. From my understanding, OXLA shows that this is federal jurisdiction. And so these minerals, unfortunately, while they are in what us as residents of the Marianas consider our waters, it is by legal definition the federal land, federal submerged lands. So one of the issues that we have there, and again, I think I would love to have a legal expert in here, one of the considerations though is when we talk about the plumes, those will migrate and those will come in, depending on the currents, potentially could come into our waters. They will also impact our fisheries. So I think that that is where we can have a conversation, because we, even though it's not occurring necessarily on Marianas jurisdictional 3 nautical miles, we will be seeing potential impacts on our fish species.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Like, because this is not just like one of those vehicles. While I don't have all the specifics about like what would actually be happening, like how many vehicles, how many boats, and all that other stuff, how many ships. I think that the prospect of having those plumes make their way closer to where we're at, all of a sudden our beautiful beaches, you know, start picking up some of that stuff. Maybe there's a storm out there. I mean, the ships will move away from the storm, but those plumes don't just magically go away.
Yeah.
So, you know, that stuff starts coming in this way, and there you go. And you're introducing stuff, again, stuff that was at the bottom of the ocean, 10,000 feet-ish, now circulating with everything else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another consideration too is this technology for ferromanganese crusts and nodules has only ever been prototyped. We actually haven't seen successful mining in this region of ferromanganese crust or polymetallic nodules demonstrated yet. Most of the mining companies have prototyped their machinery, but at this point, I am not sure if it's to scale or not.
Well, you know, it's a tough thing. There's always a couple sides of the issue, right? I mean, some people, there's always two sides of the pancake, as one of my former bosses told me one day. And the other side is the potential financial uptake. But like you were saying, that deal that was negotiated with folks, or not even negotiated, outlined with one of those companies that's interested in that leasing, is like 1% that would go back to American Samoa. I mean, even if it was 10%, like it would be, some of the environmental impacts would be, you know, pretty, it'd be pretty tough. How can you balance those out? But it's a lot easier when, you know, all your schools are paid for and all that stuff. So I don't know where it's at. From the people I've spoken with, they said that a lot of this RFI, there isn't really a plan yet. It was just more of an idea. It's that first, you know, what do you think? Is anyone interested? We don't even know what's out there. You know, what do you think?
Yeah, so the RFI is just that. It is a request for information, but it is the first step in a regulatory process where you put a request out for information. And so we have community members that are commenting, whether they're pro mining or against mining. And then we also have large labs that are in the continental US and Canada and really globally working on comments to show that this is a very data scarce region. We don't actually know how much of these resources are here and if it would be worth the potential environmental implication. Now, what I will say, going back to the American Samoa process, is it is just the goodwill of the leasee. So that leasee, of the goodwill of their heart, said we'll give them 1%, right? So it's not even within the lease conditions that BOEM may set forth if they continue to proceed down this regulatory path. So it's the request for information, and then it is the looking at the different lease block areas. And then from there, potential, there will be environmental analysis, and then leasing out the different lease blocks to prospective companies.
I mean, the idea, yeah, we know that we could trust them. But the idea of it being something that could be a benefit to the Commonwealth is attractive. The only thing is it doesn't seem that there's enough that we know about to actually make that work yet. And that it would, and we also can't say for sure that it would be something that would keep us clean too. I mean, it basically looks like open pit mining to me, but under the sea.
Yeah, well, you're not entirely wrong. And it's the mining processes, again, the ferromanganese crust, they're scraping the top off. The nodules, they're picking up the actual nodules or vacuuming up. And then for the mud mining, the rare minerals are actually between 7 to 10 meters below the benthos, below the bottom of the seafloor. So then they're digging up between 7 to 10 meters, so around 21 to 30 feet. Lifting up all of that benthic substrate, that benthic material, sucking it up into their support vessel, and then processing the rare minerals. So that is quite a bit of disturbance to the benthic community, but we're not just worried about the acute impact. Again, we're worried about the pluming when the rewatering occurs, or dewatering occurs. So, so very little is known about this area. So very little is known about mining processes, except for the different prototypes and strategies that we've seen so far. But we can, human history has proven that when we are extracting our natural resources, we tend to be pretty hard on the environment around us. You can look at the lithium mines in the Amazon. You can look at all of the deforestation that's occurred. There are impacts. It doesn't matter what resource you're extracting or exploiting, there's going to be a cost-benefit analysis that needs to be done, and that's what I'm really imploring, all of us to take a hard look at is the cost of this going to be worth it? And again, all of that is to say that I understand why folks, when they initially look at this, we are in difficult economic times, but I don't think that this is the job market creation that we're looking for. These companies will have their own tradesmen and technical skill sets, and we're not going to have the infrastructure to refine the minerals, at the pace that they want. So the minerals are probably going to go back to the continental U.S. for refinement or to an ally. So,
And not even necessarily an ally, just somebody who's a business partner.
Right.
So with this, what's interesting to me is that I've had a couple of conversations with people who would be on different sides of whether they would want it or not want it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the folks who seems pretty pro industry on this says that there is somebody who's already interested in setting up one of those refining places here, and I need to hear more information from him. He's going to try to get me an interview with the head of this company. The idea of mineral refining doesn't seem to me like a clean process. I think of it like those awful cartoons that they make to scare you about big industries and stuff, right? So that's number one. But economic impact could be a plus, but it doesn't seem like it's a perfect fit for where we're at. This is not Cleveland, right? Sorry, Cleveland, but it's not the same. It's not the same kind of place. The other side is that someone was telling me that there's probably a very small likelihood that that part would happen here, but because they don't need the infrastructure, because they would come in with their own chips and all that other stuff and mine that stuff and then go elsewhere, the likelihood that this could happen is a lot higher because they wouldn't have to establish all this stuff. So it's kind of tough. So if people get riled up, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, the economic impact, if that's supposed to be a good thing, the returns for us would be probably minuscule, especially if they're not going to be doing anything here at all.
Exactly. It's another example of the community bearing the brunt of the environmental cost and not getting enough of the economic return. In my mind, from what I have read, because these mining processes are only prototyped, and because so little is known about the benthos, we really don't know how much damage we could potentially be causing.
No, and how could you monitor, right?
Exactly.
So, what made me think about this, we had the folks from the Nautilus come on here, and what a cool adventure that was and everything. And this is where I get like, it gets me, I'm an optimist. I'm a balanced optimist, I will say that. I'm not a first-time pessimist, but I was thinking about this. I'm like, these guys come out here and doing all this research and all this other stuff. I wonder if some of that was just for things like this. If it was also helping to kind of see what's out there, use those kind of tools and stuff to do that exploratory stuff under the guise of just science, when it is science, but like economically driven for stuff like this.
Yeah, so I think that whenever there is exploration occurring, it is the information is made public, and it is not within the organization's purview to say what can or cannot be done with the data that are found. And so I think anytime that nodules do come up on a cruise, not just the Nautilus but other research vessels, I mean, the scientists will write about these discoveries. It's how that information is then used by parties of interest like BOEM, like the independent mining companies. So, exploration is a double-edged sword and has historically, it's just a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I've learned that from Indiana Jones. That has definitely been the thing. All right, so is there any kind of middle ground on any of this stuff? Like just listening to the way you were describing it about that scraping sounds terrible, sucking up all that mud, getting down to the stuff that's underneath sounds like really invasive too. But you also said that those nodules sounds like they can just almost pick them up. Is that something that's less invasive that could still be something if they change the way they do it? And by the way, I know that also sounds awful to like people who are real environmentalists, because, well, how could, I know, they take millions of, I know. But, like, is that a middle ground for any of this stuff? Would that even make sense?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you're asking about the middle ground, because ultimately this is a conversation that needs to be held by the community, and it's a decision that needs to be made by the community, because we're the ones who are going to be bearing the brunt of the impact. And so the nodule pickup, yes, you're not scraping the crust off. There are still organisms that rely on the nodules, because it's the only hard substrate on the benthos in those abyssal plains. Otherwise, it's really soft, silty, deep mud. And so these nodules do provide hard benthic substrate for organisms to attach to live on, and it creates habitat. So it is destructive to those organisms, but if you're looking at the destruction or the cost to those organisms versus the potential, economic gain from harvesting the nodules, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that. However, I will say that again, you still have that dewatering plume. You still have an impact to the fisheries that could be occurring if they use the technology that they're proposing right now. I'll also say that those nodules are kind of a one and done. So it takes millions and millions and millions of years to create these ferromanganese, to create these polymetallic nodules. So it's like a shark tooth has fallen on the bottom of the seafloor, and the seawater and the minerals are accreting, and they are creating this shell around the hard item that has dropped, like a shark tooth, for instance. And so once you've collected that nodule, you've got a 3 million year return on it. Like, you got to come back in 3 million years to be able to reharvest and another of those nodules. It's not a renewable resource by any stretch of the imagination.
What if we just limit the way they extract it? What if we say you can take all the nodules you want, but you got to free dive to get them?
3,000 meters.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
if you can handle that, we've got a deal, and we'll just take 1%.
Yeah, and again, I think that those are conversations that
I know it's ridiculous.
Yeah, should be had by the community, but it is something that, as a conservationist or as a natural resource manager, I am really conscientious of, because we need to have those balanced perspectives of what is viable for the economy here versus what is the cost of the potential environmental damage. And so again, that's really where I think that we should have those conversations with folks in the community. We should inform people about these processes, and we should, let them know what technology is available. Right now, freediving 3,000 meters isn't available, but maybe one day. So it's just kind of, it's balance.
Well, by the time they figure that out, it'll be 3 million years. They can go back and get some new ones. Add some new nodules. All right,
Yeah.
all right. Ridiculous stuff all the way around. But so this is really interesting to me. The idea of the concept of just deep sea mining doesn't bother me at all, but because it's close to us and all that stuff, that's where it is. It's like I am I love deer. I think they're great. I love the idea of coming in contact with them and getting to know them. I also think they're delicious. So for this one, I'm trying to find where that is on this too. The last thing that we want is, I can imagine last thing anyone would want was that any of our fishing situations, I mean, this is probably way outside where we're fishing anyway, but that plume that could drift over this way to affect our fishing grounds, to affect our beaches, to affect, any of the life, how would that go? Drifting off to our reefs also. I mean, and you see that's on the east side, but it would still come back around the other side. So, and I can't imagine that sediment from about 10,000 feet wafting through the waters and gradually landing on the coral reefs that we have would be a good thing at all, or at least it's an unknown.
Yeah, sedimentation is definitely a concern. One point that I would like to make is, even though it is about 100, the furthest or the nearest area is about 128 miles from us, the ocean, everything is all connected, right? So fish don't know that this is like our territorial water, and they don't leave that barrier, right? So everything, the food web is very interconnected from the bottom of the seafloor all the way up to the top of the photic zone. And so it's realistically what we are concerned about is impacting one component of the food web, of the food chain, and it then having very negative consequences.
Wow.
What's Angelo saying?
Well, he said some stuff. Typically, when I get those things, I usually don't tell people who said it. So now he's out there. You know what? That's what he gets for having long hair. But he was saying that sometimes those cruises that are going on out there, those exploratory things, can't have their funding, based in some of those places, or in some of those kind of companies and all that other stuff. And that's the same folks who are funding his hair products, that are having all that stuff.
I will say, if you go to the Ocean Exploration Trust webpage, they do have BOEM as a sponsor. And so I think all of this, again, it's really important to consider the context. And the context of this is we had 3 executive orders that were pushed out earlier this year in January that are really calling for mineral independence. And so then BOEM, because they are a federal organization, they are trying to adhere to those executive orders. So considering, where this is coming from is an important part of this conversation.
Yeah, it's so far away from the mainland, and it's kind of far away from us, but not really. That's why it's not something that we could even monitor, and I don't think regular folks could even monitor that either. That's where I think the opportunity for things to kind of get out of hand exist, right? You can't just, Coast Guard just can't roll in and say, how things going? Let me hop on and take a look. That kind of stuff's not going to happen.
And again, because these processes are really relatively unknown and untested, it's unclear as to who will actually do the enforcement. The Coast Guard will be responsible, presumably, for the support vessels, but what about the tube that is running vertically through the water column? What about the ROVs? Will that be uninspected? Will that be unenforceable? Will that be a Navy issue? And so the question of enforcement, like locally, we don't have that capacity, but what does federal enforcement of this actually look like?
I'm not really aware of all the technology involved of how they tested for all of this. Like being able to know that underneath that mud, that deep is where all those materials are. But what lies beneath that, and how deep do they go for that stuff? Like you said, 7 to 10 feet or 7 to 10 meters?
Meters, yeah.
Okay. So, that's a considerable amount, like 33, 35, 36 feet underneath the mud already to get to that stuff. And then how deep is the material base for all that stuff, right?
Yeah, so that is such a fantastic question, and I've only recently been pointed to what they're doing in Japan. They are doing deep sea mud mining, and they're extracting the rare minerals from that. And so we can look at the case studies in Japan to see, what the actual volume of rare minerals they're extracting from the mud could be.
And is there anything good out of this? Is there a possibility? Right now, the only thing that people are talking about is the economic impact, if there is one. Could that be the upside of this? All the other negatives are the heavy, right? All the stuff that we were talking about, save for American Samoa's 1% maybe, and 1% of who knows what that is. And, the other thing is, you mentioned about who the lessees, people are going to end up leasing that mining right for all that. Who negotiates that exactly?
So that is through BOEM. So the two companies right now that are out there are Impossible Metals and the Minerals Company. And so these two companies are currently the ones that have been interested in prospecting the Indo-Pacific region and the Western Pacific region. And so in the request for information, these companies could hypothetically even put forth, like a proposal, because this ultimately is for interest in leasing blocks of this area.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Here's one that says Guam's 130 miles away from here, so like 120. So the area is closer than Guam. Pagan's 200 miles away, so it's much closer than Pagan. That's absolutely true, and I know that from traveling there. So it is closer for sure, but you don't have to cross those red lines. Are those floating?
Yeah, the red lines are
You're able to
floating.
see them? Okay,
yeah.
I just want to make sure.
But one thing that is important to note is that the monument, again, those waters aren't static. And so we do have the islands unit where fishing is allowed through permit. And I know that that's a fantastic area to fish with a permit. There's fantastic seamounts there that are just covered in coral for as far as the eye can see. Coblerville full of fields, right, of corals. And so I think what we can consider is the unknown. We can only estimate how much this sedimentation could potentially impact the mid-water ecosystems. And then we also have, again, that webinar by Dr. Jeff Drazen out of University of Hawaii today at 2 p.m. If you could share that link with all your listeners, that'd be great. And then we have the American Memorial Park Community Conversations hosted by Northern Marianas College tomorrow afternoon 4:30 to 7 p.m.
So we've posted it on our socials and on the website, YouTube and everything. And then what we plan on doing is getting on there and just broadcasting the whole thing, so that everybody can see what's going on.
Yeah.
So it should be pretty interesting, and from our side of it, it's going to be really educational for us. We're looking forward to it. Now, let's talk a little bit about something else. It's not much else. It's really close. I just got to find the right screen on there to get it. Hold on. Because I put on a fancy little picture for you and everything.
I'd also like to point out real fast that there is a toolkit that Friends of the Marianas Trench has put together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that is a really helpful community resource. That one is by the National Ocean Protection Coalition. So that's the toolkit deep sea mining near the Marianas Trench. But then there's also the Friends of the Marianas Trench one that Angelo and Sheila Babauta have been working on as well.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I did get that from them before. This is the one that you got me this morning, right?
Yes, and then I think I also maybe WhatsApped you the other one too.
Let me find out. Bum, bum, bum. By the way, WhatsApp is the awesome part of our show here.
Should be that top.
This one here?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, well, let's put you on here first, and then, because everyone, while I pull that up, you see what's on the screen. This is tomorrow night.
Yes, that is tomorrow night. So that is a community conversation. We've got a series of panelists to talk about different perspectives of deep sea mining. And then we'll have an open Q&A where the audience can ask the panelists questions. And then we'll have a period where if people prepared comments that they'd like to say, we'll have an open comment period as well.
Ooh,
Yeah, and so that is the Friends of the Marianas Trench Deep Sea Mining Resources, educational resources. And they've done a really fantastic job working on compiling all of those educational resources. They also have templates for comments, and it shares the different upcoming events as well.
Yeah, and here, this is it here, changing it into the old PDF. All right, so, and this is it. This is kind of letting everybody know what's going on. This is where you can get that Zoom link as well. And again, you don't have to get the Zoom link if you don't want. It's going to be here if you just want to sit back and relax and you don't want to clog that stuff up too. This is going to be interesting. So let's go through community conversations. This is the thing that we're going to be doing tomorrow. Ways to participate. Federal Register, where people can submit those comments directly. You can sign a petition that's through the Friends of the Marianas Trench. And this is an actual letter that is also led by Friends of the Marianas for like organizations and businesses and all that. And then you can share a whole bunch of posts.
Yeah.
So pretty interesting stuff. They outline all their concerns and all this other stuff. And I approach it a little bit from like in the middle, like the deer thing, right? So I can't be all in on conservation without thinking of what the balance is on all that stuff. I care about conservation, like I care about clean water, clean air, all that stuff. I mean, for sure. But like at a balance thing, like I still like the idea, or not just. I think I got to remember what the wording is. The about conservation is one thing and management's the other one, right? So it's like that balance.
Yeah, and so it's the management of a natural resource for the community, right? And I think that middle of the road approach in terms of this is an important consideration, especially when we're considering these the economic hardships that the CNMI is going through. But again, just with the way the process and the jurisdiction is set up right now, it is very unlikely that the CNMI would realize any of the benefits fiscally from these mining activities. The other consideration is, more information is needed. Just so much is unknown about these areas. And so we really just need more science to understand what the potential impacts of mining could be, what ecosystems are there. So much of the benthic community and these deep sea organisms are actually just undescribed. Almost every time you're going on a cruise, on a deep sea exploration cruise, you're discovering and finding new organisms. So it's just such a unknown place that it's hard to say what the damage could be.
Yeah, and proving that that benefit is even there. I mean, like, so that's it. So that's interesting to me. Even if we were able to mine those things ourselves here, which we can't, there's no chance, we're not doing that. But even if we ended up having that ability, like the idea of having that kind of a refinery, like on Saipan, sounds awful. I mean, like, I don't know how much money it would take to make that work. Like, if everybody in Saipan gets, Tini and Anaroda, everybody gets $1 million. Oh, maybe. No, it sounds terrible. Yeah. But that still is not a likely outcome of any of this, right? That's not how this would work.
Yeah, and we already have a difficult enough time with remediation from the other, previous military activities from World War II. We're still dealing with unexploded ordnances. There's also contamination in our soils from the storage areas, the fuel storage areas. And then now a new issue is per and polyfluoral alkyl substances.
Well, that just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, it sure does. And so PFAS, as they're kind of like colloquially known, the acronym, love it in alphabet soup. These come from anything that is flame adverse, and so firefighting agents are a main source of PFAS. And the Marianas, Saipan specifically, is where the joint regional firefighting activities used to occur.
It's all your fault, Ed Dela Cruz. Not true.
Not saying that. So,
no, he's
we're dealing with these PFAS, and CUC has installed so much equipment, about $4 million worth of filtration systems, kind of like a giant Brita almost. Travis could talk more about this, but essentially we're having to deal with the PFAS contamination in our CUC well water and in our aquifer. So we're already dealing with one environmental contaminant, and then the unknown of what the refineries could look like to me, it is an intimidating prospect.
Right, and that's a man-made issue. It's funny, one of the other issues that we had with the waters over in that area, that same area, nitrates from all the cattle.
Yeah.
So, like, that's like a more of a natural issue, but still, like, there's all kinds of things with this that PFAS is just insane. When you think about it, that we have that giant Brita out there. And by the way, that's not done, because we still have to figure out what we're going to do with that filter stuff after it's all done too, after it's all used up. All right, so we got the webinar today. That's at 2 o'clock. And then tomorrow night at AMP is going to be the big deal also, right? So who are some of the folks that are going to be present for tomorrow night?
So tomorrow I'll be giving a brief overview on deep sea mining and what it actually is, and talking about the minerals that are outlined in the RFI. And then we've got a representative from Department of Lands and Natural Resources, Ms. Kalani Regis. Then we'll also have Cecilio, who will be representing the fisherman contingency and speaking about his own perspectives. And then we will also have CJ Clement Bermudez Jr., who will be speaking on it from an economics perspective. And so we'll have those panelists up there speaking. Those are everybody who's confirmed so far. Again, we've had to put this together like relatively quickly on the fly, because we only have a 30-day comment period. And so we'll have those folks up there speaking. We have Auntie Frances Sablon, who's going to be our moderator, and then we'll have Dr. G giving some opening remarks.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So, and like you mentioned, the 30-day comment window, we have already put in a request to extend it by 120 days. No response on that yet?
Yeah, I checked the Federal Register this morning, and I haven't seen any extension on the deadline.
You're the one who checks.
Yeah.
That's great.
only recently.
Okay. So in lieu of that approval, we only have until December 12th.
That is correct.
So you got 10 days, Marianas, if you think one way or another about this, to submit your comments. You can do it at the Federal Register, which is on there, right there. And you can't miss this big thing that I'm flashing on the screen. I'm talking about the public comment button. So you can check that out. We'll put the you guys can't see it, so I guess you can't miss it. So this is at the Federal Register page itself, and I'll scroll that back so you can see it. We'll put that link in the comments, And let's see, I'm going to just go into our comments, by the way. You guys who have been watching and everything, thank you so much. But we're going to get into some of your comments real quick as I move this around so it doesn't look like I'm totally cranking my neck on the screen. All right, well, I love Bruce Camacho. He's like, there's got to be some submerged UAPs all down there. I'm like, yep, that's it. And make sure you wear that tinfoil, buddy. I'm with you. Juan saying, morning, Brad. Legislators need to lock in a percentage of the profit from the mining. That's great. Joyce saying, leave it alone. 2 exclamation points. That was good. Caleb's was talking about some of the, I think that's when we were talking about the other things that were happening, the other chemicals. Is that what's causing all the kidney problems? Just wondering. Then Juan was in there again. He said, AMP presentation, honestly, have very little community involvement. Poor outreach means low numbers and not a good representation of the 40,000 people here. And he says, usually less than 30 people go. Well, you know, I'll tell you what, Juan, that's a good point. And hopefully that's what, you know, having Kelsey come in here to talk about this stuff will help spur, you know, spur more conversations and have people learn more about it. I mean, I could tell you as much as I know about it. We talked about everything I know about it so far. So we're going to hear from some folks who do know about that, and we're going to have that perspective also today at 2 o'clock. So one of the cool things about this platform is that we can talk about all this stuff and get the word out about all kinds of stuff, reach a lot of people, and hopefully make it kind of interesting too. It's interesting to me, anything that could happen here. Imagine we're in this weird economic situation where, you know, maybe we might be more, I don't know if susceptible is the right word, but we may be more primed for making decisions that are more economic based than environmental based. And if we don't learn more about this stuff, you know, could we be making a big decision? Is the decision even ours to make? You know, and if not, and we're upset about that, you know, we should probably let somebody know about it.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of more community involvement and empowerment in the decision-making process. This is a tale as old as time. The federal government's like, hey, we're going to come do this. And we're like, whoa, wait, what? And so I think, you know, getting folks involved in the public comment period, Juan's absolutely right. You know, we need as much outreach of this as possible. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you.
And for the opportunity to talk more about this. And so I just really want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in. Please go to the Federal Register. Please tune in to the webinar today at 2 p.m. And also come check out the event at American Memorial Park. We can't wait to see you there.